lot that with the mental health ministry, um, one of the things that really helps people a lot is knowing they're heard. Not that we have to have answers for people, but that people know they're not alone, that they've been seen, that they've been heard and listened to with love and kindness. So here's a definition for active listening is giving full attention to what someone is saying, listening with empathy, and trying to understand their perspective. Okay, next screen. I've never taught a class before, so if it's all wonky, I apologize. Hopefully I'll be able to make it somewhat clear. Active listening is based on love. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. Jesus is love. He's the fullest expression of God's love for us. When we listen to each other, when we care, when we really hear each other, when they're hurting and they're vulnerable with us, we can't necessarily solve their problems for them, but if they know that people are with them, that they are accepted and loved exactly where they're at, with no judgment, we help to carry their burden. Knowing you're not alone is powerful. It can be the difference between giving up and holding on to hope. Listening to someone fully with kindness and compassion is a powerful way to demonstrate the love of God in another person's life. Next one, please. Why is it important? It's a fundamental life skill and foundational in every relationship. It strengthens connection, safety, trust, and a sense of fulfillment. It fosters better communication, conflict resolution, and better problem solving. So before we get into general principles, I just want to share with you my journey and how I arrived at this point. Um, in my nature, I'm not necessarily a great listener. I'm always thinking about what I want to say, how I want to reply. I want to fix. And often because I am waiting to respond or to answer, I can come across as really dismissive of the person who's talking to me. And I've needed a lot of help to really mature and grow my empathy when someone is talking to me. Um, for some very personal reasons that I won't go into here, I found it necessary to get involved in the community of people who have survived sexual violence. And there was a volunteer organization that I got involved with called WAVA, Women Against Violence Against Women. And they have a very extensive training program for volunteers who are going to work on the crisis line, people who call in who are going through trauma, who have experienced trauma, who are in active crisis. And so from 10 years ago to now, I've had about 250 hours of training in crisis intervention, in trauma-informed counseling, in active listening. And when we're on the line, it's 100% focused on active listening and being fully present for the person who's calling in. And I've put over 1,000 hours on the line, and I've taken several hundred calls over the years. And so I have seen how active listening works. It inspires trust, it gives hope, it helps people know that there is a safe place for them to talk and to be themselves where they'll be accepted. So we're going to break this up into a few different parts. I'm going to go into some general principles, and then there'll be a pause, and we'll have a bit of time for people to ask questions, clarify, give input, give advice, insight, and then we'll go on to the next section. Okay, so it's not just going to be droning on for like half an hour or whatever. So there are a few overriding general principles, and this one's going to be important for some of us. It's going to be a little harder for some of us than others. The first one, remove distractions. Put away your phone. Turn off the technology, turn off the TV, close the laptop. If possible, get to a quieter place. And if possible, set aside any chores or activities. So for example, when I'm at home and one of the kids wants to talk, I actually have to decide to stop cooking or to stop folding laundry or turn off the TV. turn around and face that person and give them my full attention. I'm not a phone person, so it's not a problem for me to just set my phone down. For some of us, even just holding the phone is not enough because it'll ping or notify us, and then we'll just start looking at the phone. And I don't know if you've ever been in a position where you're trying to talk to someone and then they're checking their texts, they're checking emails, they're checking whatever it is that's pinging on their phone. And it makes you feel like you're competing for attention, and it doesn't inspire a sense of being a priority to this other person. So for some of us, putting down the phone isn't going to be enough. It's going to require us putting it in our pocket, putting it in a backpack, putting it away out of reach so that we can focus on the person talking to us. The next principle, confidentiality. Now, this is important. Being vulnerable is hard, folks. We all know this. So let's be trustworthy of the vulnerability of the person talking to us and consider someone sharing their heart with us to be a sacred space. What is said in the conversation stays in the conversation. This is something that should just be assumed. It shouldn't be something that the person talking to us is fearful that we're going to go off and just share, their information, their details, what they've been saying to us. Let's be worthy of the trust that the person is showing us when they're talking to us. And the third principle, and it's related to confidentiality, consent. This is massive. Consent. We need to ask for consent before sharing the conversation with others and how much detail, and consent for initiating physical touch or offering counseling. So sometimes out of the goodness of our heart, because we want to get advice, this person, we care about them, we want to get some advice on how to help this person or support this person better. And so we go and talk to someone else who we think could help us help this person. However, this person doesn't know that we were asking for advice. This person didn't give us permission to go ask for advice and talk about their situation. So if we want to do that, if we want to ask for advice on something that this person has said to us, ask this person, hey, I really want to help you. I don't have a lot of information in this area. Do I have your permission to go and ask so and so for some input? And if yes, how much are you comfortable with me sharing? How much detail are you comfortable with me sharing? Because it's your story, it's not my story. And this one may be a little bit surprising for some people, but we need consent for initiating physical touch. Um, I know it's common for us to just automatically give each other a hug when we walk into church, and some of us are better with it than others. Um, but actually, this person's body is not my body. And it's okay to say, hey, do you need a hug? Would it help you if I gave you a hug? Would you like a hug right now? Do you want me to sit closer to you? Is it okay if I took your hand? Would that comfort you? Um, in our household, there are four people, and one of us loves hugs, especially when they're upset. Um, Full body hugs, long hugs, doesn't let go, you know, hold the hand, put their head on my shoulder, loves hugs. The other one, a fist bump is enough. Putting my hand on their hand is enough. A touch on the back is enough. They're not a hugger. The third one is really easygoing. You want a hug? Sure. Don't give a hug? Fine. Walk up to them and give them a hug? Sure. They're really easy come, easy go. Myself, if I'm in physical pain, if I'm in emotional or mental pain, if I'm hurting, don't touch me. It feels oppressive, it feels invasive, and I have a nearly visceral reaction to being touched if I'm upset. One household, one family, four very different reactions to physical touch. And it can be easy sometimes to think because if we're comforted by a hug, that other people are comforted by getting a hug. And actually, that's not the case. And even a hug may look different to someone else than it does to us. So it's always a good idea. Obviously, if you really know this person, like if it's a family member and you know where they're at with their level of comfort with physical touch, you don't necessarily need to ask because you know them that well. That's fine. But if you don't know for sure, generally speaking, I would say just check in. Hey, would you like a hug? Can I give you a hug? Is that okay with you? Would that comfort you, or is that just too much for you right now? Just check in. Also, sometimes when someone's talking with you, they don't need counseling or they don't need problem solving or fixing. They just need to be heard. And so it's also okay to, if they're talking, to say, what do you need from me right now? Do you just need someone to listen to you? A sympathetic ear? Do you need input? Do you need us to brainstorm together to sort of figure out what your next step can be? What do you need from me? I want to make sure that I give you what you need. So it's not a bad idea to just get their permission. Um, what do they need from us? And let them tell us, let them lead us to give them what they need. So in the bottom line, at the bottom of the screen, this is how I make it simple. To simplify, if it is not my body, not my story, not my life, I don't get to make any decisions for them. I need to check in with them and they can tell me what they need from me. Okay, next screen. Oh, sorry. So that was just the introduction and the general principles. Sorry. Um, if anyone has any questions, I can't see anybody. Just shout, or any input or thought, advice, any clarification that you need. Now's the time. And then the practicals section is a bigger chunk. So if you have any thoughts right now on anything you've heard so far, now's the time to speak up. I'll give it a few seconds, and then if nothing, we'll move on.
Yeah, I have a question about maybe it was your second point
Mhm.
um, about confidentiality. I love the way that you framed it as a sacred space. Um, that there's something about that that just makes it like just yeah, just very special, and
Yeah,
that is a space between me and God to like okay, like honor, right?
yeah.
You also, and here's my question. You mentioned that, yes, ask the other person, hey, can I, is it okay if I speak with, this person or that other person to seek for more help? And it occurred to me, I don't know that it's ever happened to me, but I guess it can happen that what if someone says, actually, no, do not seek help, you know,
Yeah.
do not share with anyone. What do you normally do in that situation?
You respect their decision and you move on. That's their decision. Um, and they're an adult, or even if they're not an adult, they know their own mind. And what you can do is just say, okay, I respect that. If at any future point you would like me to seek some help, or input, just let me know and I'm happy to do it. I saw Annette ask what if you don't want to share the name? So that's where we check in with how much information do we share. So if the person says, sure, ask some advice on my behalf, but I don't want them to know that it's me, absolutely. Just say to the other person that you're seeking advice from, I spoke with someone recently. This is sort of the general outline of the situation. Do you have any thoughts that I can bring back to this person? But the person who's sharing with you, they get to decide how much information you share. Their name, if they don't want it shared, that's fine. They don't get to share. We don't get to share their name. Um, how much detail? You know, um, like say you had an interaction with someone's parent, but you don't want them to know that it's from kids class because it might get back to the parent of this child that you had an interaction with. Great. Then we don't share that it's from kids class. Just say, hey, I talked to someone who's talking to a parent and they're just seeking some more advice about how to handle a situation. Can I ask you about that? So the person who's sharing with you, they do get to decide what details you share, how much you share, and if you don't share at all. And you may think that it would be a really great idea to get more input, but if they don't want you to seek advice, you don't seek advice because it's their story. It's not our story at the end of the day. Yeah. Did that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And just a comment. So sound to
Mhm.
me, the confidentiality point is about respecting the person.
Yeah.
Supposedly in our mind, we think that need help,
Yeah.
and waiting for their initiative or their express their requests. So
Yeah.
I guess patient and wait, even though we
Yeah.
want to help, but we just have to respect their boundary or their privacy. So that's what
Yeah.
conveyed to me. Right?
I really appreciate you bringing that up. When I was first diagnosed with depression, I was devastated, and I had a talk with some of my closer friends for a number of uh, quite a while before I was comfortable enough to go public and just go, well, this is life. I'm going to normalize it because I'm not going to be, I'm choosing to not be ashamed of my mental health issue. And they respected the fact that it was my choice to go public, that it wasn't, even though they cared about me, it wasn't for them to go and talk about it, to seek input, to get help for me. It's my story. And so they had to wait for me to be ready to share the details of my life. And I think that's what it comes down to, like what you're saying, Yim. It's about respect and
Mm,
just trusting that this person, when they're ready to share
mm,
publicly or for you to share publicly, they will let
mhm.
you know. It's
Okay.
trusting them and respecting them.
Thank you. Appreciate
Does
that.
that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else? Anybody else? Thank you for all the input so far. I'm loving it.
I think one thing, presumably if you're going to someone else to get advice, you're going to somebody who's mature and, but I think it's just worth mentioning that in order to respect the person that you're going on behalf of, if the if you're getting advice from someone and they're asking probing questions about like trying to get more information about who this might be, you have to be ready to say, hey, I can't tell you that,
Nope.
and please don't ask more questions along that line because
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
people are just naturally curious, often in a helpful way and sometimes not. But like that's just human nature is to be curious. And I guess if you want to help, people want as much information as possible. But
Yeah.
yeah, you just have to be ready to like I'm not going to cross that line,
Yeah.
even if someone asks. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. And here's a term that we sometimes hear, but I think it's appropriate to use it here. When someone comes to us, we need to think of ourselves as their ally, right? So if we're seeking advice on their behalf from someone else, and this person keeps asking us, like Andy was saying, probing questions, they want to figure it out. As an ally, we have to think about protecting the trust that they've shown in us and not violating that. Does that make sense? Okay. Are we?
I'm
Yep,
just
go
going to
on.
on to, I was going to add to the statement that I made about the hugging. Uh,
Yes, please.
yeah, I was thinking about it, and I guess the reason why that hit me was it's easy to, well, for me, if somebody doesn't want to hug me, it's really hard for me to accept that that's how they feel. It's not a personal thing. It's not a personal attack. No, I don't want to touch you,
Yeah,
touching me, that kind of thing. Um,
I
like
get
you,
that.
I've got I've got my sensitivities. Um, so that's a big one for me is if somebody doesn't want a hug, I have to take a step back and say, don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. They don't mean it personal. It's just, they don't want a hug.
Yeah,
And so that's been the big one that hits me is, Yeah, don't take it personally. So, because I can automatically think, okay, what did I do?
Yeah.
What did I do? Did I do something? Please tell me, what did I do?
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that, Ellen. And I get that everyone has different comfort levels around things like that. Um, would it be helpful for you to say, is there anything else I could do that would show encouragement? That would feel like encouragement from me.
It's getting past the I do
It's not
something
about
wrong.
me. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's all I
get
wanted to
that.
say.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's get into the practicals. And this is a larger section, so I will pause after the practicals and we can process it together. The first one is intention. Generally, we don't accidentally fully listen. We have to make a conscious decision to listen and to center the other person, meaning that we are putting our own day aside and we focus on them. So centering the other person means that in this conversation, because this person is coming to us, needing to talk, that we're putting them at the center of our focus, that what we want, what we need, what we think is best, what we think they should do, that goes away. And we're going to focus on what does this person need from me? What are they saying? If we don't know, ask questions to clarify. But we're going to focus on this person and what they need from us. Sometimes what happens is sometimes we're wanting to relate to the person, to connect with the other person who's talking to us. And so we start sharing because it relates to what they're sharing about. And then it ends up becoming this, excuse me, this thing where we kind of go back and forth, my story, their story, my story, their story. And it doesn't really help them because we're not attending to them. And so when someone comes to us and they say, I need to talk, we're going to set aside what we think they need. We're going to set aside our day and we're going to put them at the center of the conversation. And it's easy. Sometimes you're talking to someone and you need to talk, and the conversation kind of gets lost in the weeds because everyone just starts sharing because you have a good heart. You want to relate. You want them to know that they're not alone in their struggle with this, and it happens out of good heart. But in the end, the focus gets diluted and it becomes this group sharing time, which has its place, except if it's not what this person is needing, right? So this is about deciding that we're going to listen and deciding that we're going to put them at the center of this. And I'm seeing what Mary has just written. And you're right, it can be really difficult. And you know what? You have the right, you get to say, this is a bad time for me. Can we schedule a different time when maybe I have more energy or when I'm not distracted with a million things? Mary, that's absolutely valid. And it's totally okay to say that because this person wants your full attention. Okay. Also, let's go on to number 2. Yeah, there it is. It's called empathy. We have to decide how we're going to listen with compassion, to understand, to support, and without focusing on how we're going to reply. Usually, when we are thinking about what we want to say, we've stopped fully paying attention. And this is a really bad habit of mine. So, yeah, empathy is listening without judgment, and it's understanding where they're coming from, how they see the world, without judging them. It's important to note that empathy does not mean agreeing with them or approving of what they're sharing with you. I've gotten calls where, someone is going through trauma or crisis and they've turned to drugs to deal with the pain because they can't deal with the pain. I'm listening to understand why they're using the drugs. Do I agree with using drugs? I don't. However, that's not for me to say. I'm there to support them and to listen to them and for them to know that they can be honest without being judged. And I think sometimes we confuse empathy with approval, and it's not. Empathy is also not agreeing. Empathy means that you can see why they think the way they think. It means that you can see how they would see something. It's seeing something through their eyes without judgment. And I just keep saying without judgment, because it's normal, right? We assign more moral meanings to things. We assign good and bad values to things. It's who we are as humans. And so this is a skill for some of us that we need to cultivate. And it's not easy because you're going to hear stuff. I mean, you're going to hear things that people do, things that people get involved in, things that people decide, things that people have done to other people. And it's going to be hard sometimes, right? The things that they say or do. And the point isn't to approve of what they're saying. The point is to look at them and go, I get it. I get why you think the way you do. I get why you're doing what you're doing. I get why you believe what you believe. Do I agree? No, but that's not the point. I get you. I understand what you're saying. So listening with empathy means we're listening to learn. We're listening to understand. We're listening in order to be able to see how they see things. We're not listening to respond. We're not listening to fix. We're not listening to counsel necessarily. And there's actually been a lot of research done that shows that when we listen to reply, actually, we've stopped listening. Like if I'm waiting to say something to you, I'm waiting for you to finish talking so that I can say what I want to say. So in other words, what I want to say is more important. And we get away from the whole point of empathy, which is just to focus on them and just be with them in the moment and understanding where they're coming from. Third one, Andy, reflection. Reflection, using responsive words and gestures as they speak. For example, nodding, using eye contact, words that denote listening. No one wants to talk to someone who's completely unresponsive. Also helpful is paraphrasing what they're saying back to them, as this helps to clear up misunderstandings, can help to simplify the flow of information, and shows that we are paying attention. So reflection is reflecting back to them, like that you're with them, that you're listening, that you're in there with them in the moment, that you're connecting. So yeah, making eye contact, nodding when they're talking to you, like I'm hearing you. Words that denote listening. I personally say things like or sure, or I get that a lot. Other people use other words like, okay, I understand, I'm with you, okay, It's just showing that you're listening, that you're responding to what they're saying to you. And I get if that's not the way you listen and it can feel fake or manufactured. I get that. It's about reassuring the person talking to you that you're there, that you're with them. Because no one wants to talk to someone who's like this the whole time for like minutes and minutes, and they're just, there's nothing. It's like you're blank. So we all want, when we're talking to someone, when we're confiding in someone, we all want to know that they're with us, that they're there, they're hearing us. Paraphrasing can be really helpful as well. Sorry, Andy, back to the, yeah. Paraphrasing is taking what they've been saying and simplifying it and saying it back to them. So, for example, saying, "Oh, you had a tough day at school, and a friend of yours had a run-in with a teacher, and now there's a problem with the teacher at school, and you guys are wanting to be in a different class. Wow, yeah, that's a pretty big move. It sounds like something really big happened with the teacher. You're simplifying it down, you're summarizing it, and you're saying it back to them, and so they can kind of come back to you, go, yeah, like that was a big deal, and this was the thing that happened, and they were saying this, and they were saying, and then you simplify it and you say it back to them so that they know that you're hearing them, but also they can say, Yeah, but there was also a big fight. So maybe you didn't hear that part. There was a big fight with the teacher in the class. And so they're able to clarify for you this was a big part of the situation, the fight. That was upsetting. And that's why you guys went to the teacher, the principal, and you want to change classes or whatever. And it really helps to show where are you not understanding them, or how are you understanding them, or are you getting everything that they're saying to you? Okay. Let's get to handing back power. This one might be new for some of us. Handing back power. Life can be hard, and hard times can last a long time, which can lead us to feel stuck, helpless, and hopeless. And eventually, our thinking can be defined and led by these feelings. Handing back power helps to remind people that they are still in control of their choices. For example, asking them how they got through tough times in the past. So sometimes, and I know I went through this a lot, through some situations where I just felt like I'm drowning. There's nothing I can do here. I'm at the end of my energy, of my ability, of my willpower. I'm completely helpless here. And here's why things like consent is so important. You hand back power. They get to decide, if they get a hug, if you can seek advice, if you can share about their situation. I know when I'm on the line, I look for ways to show them that they have agency, that they have power. I say things like the fact that you were processing your feelings and being open about this crisis, that's brave. That is a good choice that you've made. The fact that you've called and you're willing to talk to a stranger about what's going on in your life, about a really, really tough situation, that is courage. That is a great decision. You know, you've been through this in the past. How did you get through it? Because you've demonstrated already the ability to get through tough times. And I don't say this too often because I don't want it to turn into a pat answer or a platitude, but the reality is all of us have survived 100% of our toughest times in life. 100%. We're still here. So we've demonstrated ability to survive, to heal, to be resilient, to make good choices, to come back from bad choices. And so handing back power is reminding them that it's not hopeless. They can feel hopeless, and that's absolutely legitimate. They can feel stuck, completely legitimate. They can feel helpless, of course, totally normal. The reality is there are things that we can do. We are still in control of our choices, and we can take other steps. We can take the next step. It can be the tiniest little baby step, but we have the ability to make that choice. And that's what handing back power is. Sometimes if I'm on the line, I say, what is one small thing you can do after you hang up the phone? Tiny. What's a tiny thing that you can do to help you to feel better? It could be self-care. It could be feeding themselves, treating themselves with kindness so that they feel better. They've nourished themselves. They have the ability to do that. And this is actually really, really important because the reality of the intensity of the emotions that we feel can be so dominant that we really believe there's nothing we can do anymore. The reality is the opposite, even if it's the tiniest, tiniest little thing. The fifth practical, Andy, if we can get that, holding space for silence. This is going to be uncomfortable for some of us, and that's okay. When there is a pause in the conversation, our pent up is to fill the silence. I think it's our instinct is to fill the silence. I think I spelled that wrong. Sorry, Andy. However, silence can be invaluable as some of the most important work is done in silence, such as they might be crying, which can be healing, cathartic, and a release of pent-up emotion. And the next slide. They could be processing thoughts or arriving at an insight or a decision. They might be working up the courage to tell the truth about themselves or confess sin. And it can be helpful to say, take your time, as it can give both of you permission to relax into the quietness. So holding space for silence means that in the conversation, you don't always have to be talking, that you create room and create safety for the other person to just work something out, to just cry and just let it out, to process information. The most valuable insights that we have are the ones that we arrive at ourselves, not the ones that necessarily people tell us about ourselves. And sometimes that just takes a little bit of time to arrive at that insight about ourselves. And knowing that there's safety and no pressure to sort of be there with it is so, so valuable. Sometimes people need to work up the courage to tell something about themselves that they've always been ashamed of, a secret that they've never told anyone before, or confess sin, confess hidden sin, secret sin that they've never ever been brave enough to say before. And it takes time for them to get to that point of courage. And so for those of us who are more uncomfortable with silence, because that's normal, right? Some of us get really kind of like, should I be saying something? Should I just take their hand? Like, what am I supposed to do here? It's okay. It's okay to not know what to do and to just say to both of you, take your time. When you're ready, you can speak or make a decision or decide whatever it is you wanted to decide. But silence can be so, so important. We live inside our heads. When you consider how much time we spend not talking and working stuff out inside our heads, it makes sense that in a conversation, there are going to be moments of silence because people are working it out inside their heads. And so if we create space and we create safety so that there's no pressure, that they can do the work they need to do and that requires quiet, you have no idea what a gift that can be to the person that's talking to you. Okay, so those were the practicals. There was a bunch of stuff there. We'll do the final thoughts after this pause for questions, clarifications. Anyone has anything that they need to say, anything you didn't understand before we get into the final section?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mhm.
So when back to the hugging thing,
Yeah.
you don't mean like when we come to church,
Mhm.
we have to ask everybody? No, that's
No,
not what you mean,
no,
right?
no,
You mean
no.
like in a certain setting when people
Yeah,
are, yeah,
yeah.
okay, it's not a,
So Annette, say you and I were in a having a deep talk and you were just needing to say some things or talk some things out. I wouldn't just assume that I would give you a hug. I would ask you, would you like a hug right now? But if I saw you in church, yeah, let's hug it out, man. When we see each other in church, let's greet each
Okay,
other with a hug. Go for it. It's fine. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
just wanted to clarify.
Thank you. Yeah, holding silence can be
Yeah,
really difficult.
I do have a question. Is Jen in
Yeah.
here? Jen Slavencic?
Yes.
For the point that you were saying about reflection, Jen, you familiar with NVC? Does it similar with observations of NVC?
You mean like, sorry, can you clarify what you're asking?
So the Kathy talked about reflection point, to paraphrase, to kind of help the other person know you listen. Um, and I'm kind of make my mind think of in NVC, the observations. It's kind of similar concept, isn't it?
I think observation in NVC is more about establishing what's on the table. So you're using like non-judgment or evaluative words to sort of like set the scene. So at 12 o'clock, or you came home at midnight on Friday. So it's not really reflecting the person's experience. With active listening, you're trying to connect with what another person is experiencing. So the
Mm-hmm.
reflection comes from they've shared something, put something on the table, and now you're going to reflect back to make sure that you've heard them clearly, so that you might have gotten part of it, and they might even have, you might have reflected everything back to them that they said, but just by the fact that you listened to them and reflect it back, they might even just add more to it spontaneously after that and go deeper in sharing their experience. So it's a really
Mm-hmm.
great way of just being a container for someone to share their experience and make sure that you get it right. Does that, do you want to
Okay.
add anything to that, Cathy, or?
Yep, yep. I'm not as familiar with nonviolent communication, but Jen summarized reflecting accurately. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wendy, you had something in the chat.
Oh, yeah, excuse me.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify about that question. So I understand about reflecting, and I have done it with certain people, but sometimes they just get into this state of mind where they just can't get away from the topic that is bothering them.
Right. Okay.
I'm just wondering what your thoughts are with that.
Yeah. And that requires more than you're able to give them in a conversation. We deal with this on the line sometimes, and on the line we call it a trauma loop, where it's like circular thinking. You just keep coming back to the same point again and again. It's this loop that's created, by trauma. Well, I mean, on the line is caused by trauma because it's a crisis time. Um, and it's frankly, it's more than what a conversation can quote unquote fix or address adequately. And that's where I would just say, I'm here to listen. I don't know how much further we can take this conversation. If you want, I can, you know, reach out on your behalf and ask another member of the church who has training as a counselor to reach out to you. But that's something that is that embedded in someone's thinking, that requires a professional to help them work through um, what it is that they're dealing with. I was dealing with that for a long time. There was a dysfunctional relationship that was really toxic, and I was like this with it for years, and I couldn't seem to work my way out of it. Just personally speaking, the thing that I was focused on over and over again, I realized I was focusing on that to try and answer a question I had about my own worth. And it was easier to focus on this external thing as what was causing trauma than going inside of myself and asking, why don't I feel like I'm worth loving? Because that's scary. But that required a professional helping me work through that, right? You, as someone who cares about someone, listening as an ally and a supporter, that is not something a conversation is going to solve. Some things are just beyond the scope of a conversation, and that's okay. And you can tell them, it's above my pay grade. I love you, and I'm here to support you. And if you want to get counseling, I'm happy to go with you, to drive you, talk with you after your sessions. I think that this is something that requires someone with training to help you through, and it's okay for you to say that. Does that help?
Yes, that's great. Thanks, Cathy.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there's nothing else. We'll go into the last section, which is final thoughts. It is helpful to normalize thoughts and feelings they may be experiencing. I know that there were times when I was dealing with certain things and I thought, am I crazy? Like, is it nuts for me to be bothered by this? Am I crazy for like carrying this for months and months and months in my head? And the thing is, I'm not crazy. Life is hard sometimes and things can take root and it's hard to dig those things out. So if we help people to realize that they're not crazy, that they are not abnormally stricken by God, that they are not being picked on abnormally, to help them to feel like there are other people out there in the world who are dealing with this too, that maybe there are communities out there they can plug into. I think that can help give them hope. And normalizing feelings as well gives them a sense of agency back. You know, that this is not the thing that's going to drown them. You know, this is within the normal spectrum of life experience, within the normal spectrum of emotional reaction. And it's okay. It's okay to have these feelings. And that actually there's nothing wrong or sinful about the feelings. It's just how you're feeling. Check in with them. For example, did they say everything they needed to say? Is there anything they want to clarify? Would they like a hug? How are they feeling? It helps if you can. It's not always possible, but if you can, it helps for the person to go away with some feeling of, I don't know if resolution is the right word, but a feeling of they got to say what they needed to say. They got it out, right? That they felt listened to, they felt understood, and they felt attended to, that they connected and that they were cared about. So this is not to say that their problem was solved, that they received professional level counseling, that they have a plan for going forward. It's more within the scope of this conversation. Do they feel like they got to say what they needed to say? And there was connection and they were heard and there was support. And some people like to end it with a hug, some people don't. Again, just check in. And this is a good time to say, do you want me to ask someone on your behalf, you know, how to help you with this situation? And if yes, how much do you want me to share? Or do you want me to refer them to you directly? You know, how would you like to proceed from here? Okay, next slide. Extend care beyond the conversation. If it's relevant, ask how they can show kindness to themselves later. Go out in the sun, pray, rest, go for a walk, etc. Let them know you're open to a follow-up chat if they need. Is there a next step they can take? Avoid platitudes. God is in control. Spiritualizing. Trials can be a blessing. And pat answers. Just pray about it. And also blaming questions. Why did you do that? Because sometimes we have an emotional reaction to what the person is saying, and they've said that they've done something that in your mind is just incredibly foolish. You're just like, what are you thinking? Let's try and avoid those kinds of questions. But extending care beyond the conversation. And I learned to practice this on the line because the people who call are in crisis or they're alone. You know, there's no one else they can talk to. That's why they're calling a stranger. And so sometimes, if it's relevant, I'll say to the caller, after you hang up with me, what can you do to show kindness to yourself? Because you're hurting, right? This isn't going to be solved today or tomorrow. You're going to hurt maybe tomorrow, next week, next month. But in the meantime, you can be kind you can be compassionate to yourself. Do you need to rest? Because sometimes being in crisis, you can't sleep. Your brain is just going like 50 miles an hour. Some people don't eat. Some people shut themselves off. Do you need to just go outside in the sun, sit on a bench in a park somewhere? What can you do to be compassionate to yourself? And just give yourself a sense, a moment of peace, a moment of quiet, a moment of calm. And show that you're actually worth taking care of. You know, you're worth self-love, you're worth nourishment, you're worth rest, you're worth exercise, you're worth being out in the sun, and you know, you're worth taking care of. And then the platitudes. We have been guilty of this in the past. I think we do a lot better now, so that's awesome. But we used to do stuff like that. God won't give you more than you can bear. Yes, he will, and it's biblical. Spiritualizing stuff, pat answers. Have you studied it out? Have you prayed about it? You know, let's just avoid stuff like this, generally speaking. It doesn't help. And even if some of it if some of it is true that God is in control, does it help them to know that? I'm sure they were aware of that before. Do you know what I mean? Like, does it actually help the person to say stuff like this to them. And then the blaming questions. Let's try and we sometimes do want to react. I mean, there are times when my kids say stuff to me that they've done and now they're upset, and I'm thinking, why? At what point did that seem like a good idea to do this? Right? Let's try and curb that response because that's why they're already embarrassed about, I don't know if I can talk about this. And then you're just sort of confirming why they should be embarrassed talking about this. So let's minimize or just completely avoid anything that shows blame or judgment or just confusion over the foolishness of something they've done. And then the other slide, Andy, I think it's the last one. Yeah. So like any skill, practice, practice, practice. You want to get good at anything, you have to practice it over and over and over. And especially with something like this, where, vulnerability is on the line, trust is on the line, safety is on the line, you have to practice in safety. You have to practice with other people who are like-minded, who want to learn, but want to learn in safety with you. So the mental health ministry, we're looking to create a space to practice in active listening and vulnerability in safety, and we're calling it Sacred Space. Jen, I'm going to turn it over to you after we get some feedback on this last little chunk, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. Okay. So yeah, that was the class. Any thoughts, questions, clarifications, anything, insight? I'm wide open. Absolutely.
Thank you. I go first.
Okay, yeah.
I've been taking notes, by the way. Thank you
Good.
so much. It's so rich. I really am amazed of, the skills base that you guys have so far, and I'm really thankful for all the insights and concepts. And I really do believe that practice it is just like NVC that I've been learning with Jen. And I feel like personally I have learned a tons in the past few years to be more aware of my listening skills.
Mhm.
But I think the new concept today, like handing back power, that's so great. It's like small thing, but yet it's maybe unnatural. So I'm grateful for these concepts and can't wait to put into practice.
Great, thank you. I'm excited.
All right, Sarah and Kiara.
Thank you, Mary.
Or
So yeah,
Liz.
people just speak up because I can't see anyone.
Yeah. Oh, Sarah's first. Sarah and then Liz. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay.
It was
You're raising it. Okay, Liz.
Oh, oops.
Yeah, Cathy, this is so awesome. I'm so encouraged that you
Yay.
guys are doing this. I just want to say, I mean, I've had the privilege of being trained by a few people in church as well as through work, but I'm realizing how important this is, especially for our younger generation of disciples raising up here in our church. And I'm really, really praying and hoping that, they take this opportunity. And I think from all the years of mistakes when I first became a Christian in discipling and building relationships and sharing with people, you almost think you have to have the answers.
Yeah.
You always feel like you've got to figure things out
Yeah.
for them, fix them. And when we mature and we get older and we realize it's so much more complex. And the biggest thing for me is respecting people
Yeah.
for where they're at.
Yeah.
And realizing that I love so much of what you shared about the way that we need to be compassionate and empathetic and supportive more than trying to help them get out of the situation they're in.
Yeah.
But that it's a journey. I love that piece about the journey. I really love the fact that you shared about loving yourself and taking that time to love yourself.
Yeah.
I've even felt that way about myself when things haven't been good.
Yeah.
And I've had my own struggles where I just want to vent. Like I
Yeah.
just need you to hear me. And then when someone like, I can't lie, but when you wrote in your notes about just pray about it, I just wanted to punch the screen. Like, that's the one I hate the most.
Yeah.
When you're in that place, it's like, that is not what I need from you right now.
Yeah.
I just appreciated that because, and I'm just hoping that our younger bunch really take to heart this opportunity to learn some of these things because it's been valuable, very valuable for me. So thank you guys,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. Thank you. And you know what? There's a place for venting. It has a valid
Yeah,
place.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. There's room for that. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else before we wrap up?
Hand it over to Jen.
I just wanted to say, and I think, yeah, this was really great. Thank you so much. I'm so excited that we're gonna do this again, that we have another one. I learned a ton, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And I think that I agree with with Liz about how great it would be for obviously for the younger generation as well to have access to
Yeah.
this. And I feel really hopeful, and I feel like really good about the space that you guys are creating
Mm.
and the opportunities that you're creating for us to, even what you say, like practice, even this slide, practice. And practice in a space where other people are aware and everyone is in the same, everyone is of the same mind. Because it's very difficult to practice this with someone who has no idea,
Yeah.
and perhaps if you're speaking and you're in, they're speaking with you and you're in silent and they're like, okay, obviously you don't care about what I'm saying, and it's like, no, I'm just holding space for you. So yeah, it's just that whole thing of practicing with other people. That's like, I can't wait. So thank you so much, and you did such a great
Thank
job.
you.
Like, I really
Thank
look
you.
forward to the next one.
Thank you. You know what I love about the word practice? The idea of making mistakes is built into it. So we're giving ourselves permission to make mistakes and to keep learning. And I love that we can have a growth mindset instead of having to have the answers. And as we make mistakes along the way, we'll make them together and help each other, do better. And that's so exciting to me. I love that. Thank you, Anna.
Okay. Well, you know what, Kathy? Even though we went over this beforehand in our little group, I still took more notes. I can't get enough of this stuff. Like, honestly, like, it's something that we can't talk about enough, practice enough. Like, we could do this every month and we need to hear it over and over again. So I'm so grateful for just everything that you've shared tonight. I especially love how you clarified about what active listening is and what it isn't without judgment. Like, there's a time and place to share scriptures. There's a time and a place to vent, as you mentioned. There's a time and a place for many of the things that we do for advice giving, but that's not necessarily what active listening is. So I really love all the points that you made to really help us to really get like what is active listening. And I'm so looking forward to being able to practice this with our church family. And that's what I wanted to just quickly mention about our sacred space time. We're planning on having a once a month time of just creating this sacred space where we can practice active listening. There'll be more details to come, but we're really hoping it's going to be on the first Wednesday of every month. So that'll be nice and easy to remember. And it's going to be something that it's a drop in as you feel you want to come. You can drop in and say nothing. You can drop in and spill your guts, whatever it may be. But like I said, we will be offering more opportunities for us to practice these skills that we are learning. So I'm super excited. Thank you everyone for coming tonight, and I'll pass it over to Barish. Thank you again, Kathy. Awesome job.